Well, and it gets really interesting with AI too when you start using it. I mean, my team right now, we've been having kind of a debate amongst the entire marketing team around which type of apps we're going to be using, which AI agents will be using. And we've been trying to figure out which ones are the best ones to use, what our AI architecture is actually going to end up looking like. And we've had a number of people for over a year really testing different agents within the AI atmosphere. And it's interesting because one of the people came back and she was saying, I really like using all of these. They're very helpful in writing a first draft, but there's a lot of hallucinations within it. So for instance, she would give a transcript of an entire interview with a customer to develop a case study, but the AI agent would come up with a quote that was not within the interview.
Right.
And so she would kind of talk about, well, what do I do in that case? And how do we figure out that, to get AI to better understand us? Now, most people understand with AI, you have to just keep using it daily in order for it to really start to understand you. However, there is a place for us. I don't think anyone has to worry about their jobs in marketing and communications because you can still get a good first draft like that, but it still takes human intelligence to then go back through, edit, review it, fix the quote that wasn't a real quote. You're never going to get something perfect from an AI agent. So you have to always have us here to really help interpret.
Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd.
Hello and welcome to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. Today, we're joined by Jessica Pantages. She is a seasoned marketing professional with more than 20 years of experience leading communications in aerospace, agriculture, construction, consumer, and technology industries. As Chief Communications Officer at Egnyte, she leads a global corporate marketing team that recently finalized the acquisition of Egnyte by two private equity firms. Jessica, welcome to On Top of PR.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too, and glad we got connected. We've known each other for years, and we're finally able to press record and have a conversation with our audience.
Yes, exactly. It's been overdue.
Jessica, tell me, or tell our audience the kind of elevator or executive summary of your company. What do you do and where do you do it? And, what are some of your companies, what makes your company unique?
Yeah, absolutely. So Egnyte is a B2B software company. We work in the collaboration, governance, and security spaces. We focus primarily on verticals such as construction, AEC, life sciences, and also financial services. And so essentially, we create a platform where people can share information. And we also have a very big area right now in AI. So we are looking at ways that we can leverage AI across these vertical industries and beyond.
Very nice. Well, everybody's interested in talking about AI and generative AI. We have our most popular episodes of On Top of PR tend to be where we explore AI. So I'm sure our audience is going to be excited to learn more from you today as we talk about our topic today of AI enhanced storytelling. And empowering human creativity with machine insights. So, Jessica, let's start off. Tell us a little bit more about how you first started working with AI and your transition into working in the industry.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, AI is certainly the topic du jour, and it is a space where marketing and communications and people in our profession have to get much better at using AI. And I think it will help us in the future become more efficient, more effective, and allow us to get even more done while still not losing that human aspect to it. So with the topic, we discussed was AI enhancing storytelling. And I think that is a way that communicators and marketers can use and look at AI. So it's this idea of a fusion of human narrative instinct with machine intelligence. So if you think about it, there are generative models in AI that can draft first pass headlines. They can translate social media data. They can even create images on the fly. These are things that my team is actually doing right now. And it allows my team then to focus more on strategy and relationships than on some of the more tactical type things that we had been doing in the past. And a lot of other companies are looking at this too. I was just reading the other day about the Associated Press's partnership with Automated Insights. And now what they're doing is they are having AI auto write more than 3,000 actually, quarterly earnings stories. And that helps the reporters be able to then chase down deeper features about earnings. So I think AI can really help us thread the human capacity and capabilities of contextualizing business information into pitches, press releases, and making them more relevant to reporters.
Very nice. So that's one of the things I've told clients and prospective clients for years is this idea that, if they choose to outsource to a public relations agency, that actually allows them to focus more on strategies and relationship building and being a trusted advisor internally to their organization. And I think sometimes people at, companies might feel a little threatened by bringing in outside, PR, and as, maybe a threat to their employment. But actually, I look at it as the other way around, is it empowers you to be able to delegate to the expertise of the PR firm while you remain highly available. And so if you think about it, if you're tasked with a full day of work and then in and out of meetings, when are you going to feel available and confident and helpful to the executive team members who need guidance, right?
Yeah.
And so, we want to be a trusted advisors to our clients, and our clients want to be a trusted advisor to the C-suite and executives within their organization. So, when I talk to people who are not using AI, I really look at it as, incredible missed opportunity to kind of elevate themselves into a highest and best use instead of doing a lot of the grunt work and the heavy lifting. And I think you summarized that well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think this is something also that certainly I'm sure your agency is doing, leveraging AI. And I think it's interesting, in the past, perhaps people could have had that kind of perspective with agencies and be a little bit cautious. That was never my approach. I agree with you. I think it's, best to be able to have your people shine internally and allow some of the, arms and legs and things that you need being done by an agency. But I think that, for marketing and communications professionals, taking AI and saying, I'm not, I don't think I want to use that because, it'll take away from what I can do. I think it actually can really enhance it. And I think that if you try to avoid AI now, you're just going to find yourself in a heap of trouble in the future. We need as a profession to be able to figure out how we can really use it.
Totally agree. The analogy I'm using is, were you hesitant to start using a word processor, when you were coming in your career? And then, were you hesitant to use a computer? Were you hesitant to use email? Were you hesitant to use the internet? Were you hesitant to use text messaging and then social media? And if the answer is yes to those things and you haven't learned a lesson yet, maybe it is time to find something else to do. But at the end of the day, when I hear college professors say they don't let their students use AI, I'm like, that's like telling them don't use the internet. You're handcuffing them to not be able to use the tools that are readily available for them to, produce their best work. So I don't think anybody's learning a lesson by being forbidden from using, AI. I think it's teaching them, and I hope we'll get to this later, the ethical behavior of how to use AI and how to fully leverage it. So good. Yeah.
That's true.
So you mentioned that your team is actively using generative AI to develop images. What tools do you recommend for doing that?
Oh my gosh, I should have known that you were going to ask me that. There's a couple different tools that my team has been using. First and foremost, for headlines and for improving our writing, improving our review times, we've been using things like Grammarly, U.com, and ChatGPT, which are pretty basic ones, I think, that most people have been using. My creative team is using Midjourney and Magnify AI, as well as Firefly. So a couple of those are already incorporated into Adobe's suite, but it's been very helpful for us. We just had 3 big vertical summits, virtual ones, and we were able to utilize AI-generated imagery to get them all done within a very short amount of time.
Well, that's music to, I think, everyone's ears. So, we love our art directors, but sometimes they can take a long time. And honestly, sometimes we're not giving them the input that they need. And so I saw a meme floating around that said, for people that work in marketing and PR, and I believe this person used the term clients to refer to both, agency clients, but also to the clients that, in-house people are serving, the executives in-house people are serving. And they said, the best part about generative AI is that, we'll never be, it'll never take away our jobs because, clients struggle to give really good input and input that's helpful, and so that even I've learned, interfacing with Gen AI is I'm giving it input. I'm like, okay, I used an expression that's not as clear and direct as this needs to be to give it the direction and steps that I want it to take. So I might have used a colloquialism or something like that it just completely misunderstood. So, I'm always stressing to people the importance of language and accurate language.
Absolutely.
And this is even more of a reality check, I think, for them.
Yeah. Well, and it gets really interesting with AI too when you start using it. I mean, my team right now, we've been having kind of a debate amongst the entire marketing team around which type of apps we're going to be using, which AI agents will be using. And we've been trying to figure out which ones are the best ones to use, what our AI architecture is actually going to end up looking like. And we've had a number of people for over a year really testing different agents within the AI atmosphere. And it's interesting because one of the people came back and she was saying, I really like using all of these. They're very helpful in writing a first draft, but there's a lot of hallucinations within it. So for instance, she would give a transcript of an entire interview with a customer to develop a case study, but the AI agent would come up with a quote that was not within the interview.
Right.
And so she would kind of talk about, well, what do I do in that case? And how do we figure out that, to get AI to better understand us? Now, most people understand with AI, you have to just keep using it daily in order for it to really start to understand you. However, there is a place for us. I don't think anyone has to worry about their jobs in marketing and communications because you can still get a good first draft like that, but it still takes human intelligence to then go back through, edit, review it, fix the quote that wasn't a real quote. You're never going to get something perfect from an AI agent. So you have to always have us here to really help interpret.
Yeah, I mean, our loyal listeners have heard me say a number of times that, AI is a great beginning, but a terrible ending. So meaning that, it's a great first draft. I equate it to having an intern or an entry-level employee, and you have to oversee their work. And, we've seen headlines over the years where an intern is allowed to do something and then it backfires in some way because of just the quality control or the lack of experience. And similar things here. A little hack that I've developed is I have a text replacement script that I prompt that basically tells, for frequent commands that I will give to a generative AI tool. And one of them is, basically like, hey, please double check your work, make sure you fact checked everything and you haven't created content that didn't exist within the parameters or the input that I originally gave you, because the false information is a big challenge. And another story that I've told before, Jessica, is one time I was working on something and I asked the generative AI to absolutely verify these two facts about a company's background or their product in this particular case. And it came back to me and it said, I contacted Chris at the company, and Chris verified, A, B, and C. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, it came back with that response like that. And I'm like, how in the world did you call Chris? And that doesn't seem like something that, you, one, had time to do, two, that, I think it was in with your capabilities. And so I really doubled down on this. And I just said, okay, what did Chris say exactly? How did you reach them? What's Chris's last name? What department? And all this. And it just started telling, it was like, I didn't get the last name. They work in product support and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. So I picked up the phone, called the receptionist at this company. And I said, do you have a Chris that works in product support? And they were like, no, there's only 3 people in product support, and Chris is not one of them. And so I went back to, that AI and I said, hey, what happened here? Whatever. And ultimately, it said, yeah, I called it, at 1 p.m. and I'm on Eastern time. Right. And it was only 12:50. And I'm like, how did you call it 1 p.m. Eastern time? It's only 12:50. And then it just started breaking down, like, almost like a traumatic therapy session. Like,
right?
well, I'm sorry, I actually didn't call. And I'm like, okay, why would you make this up? So I just kept having this conversation, as a learning experience for me.
Yeah.
And, that has given me heartburn and stress ever since, because, you really do have to just fact check and verify everything that it produces. So when you go into it with that lens and some cynicism, it can be useful. And I think a lot of people, when they say extreme statements like, I can always tell when something's AI generated, it's like, well, you can probably tell when something's been poorly AI generated with either poor input or not enough training. Because meanwhile, some of the content I've produced and our agency's producing, you can't tell it's AI. Even in the first draft, but that's because we've invested hours in training and uploading input and giving information to it.
Exactly. It does. It takes a long time to train AI and to make sure that you're giving them the right prompts in order to get the model to spit out usable drafts. So absolutely.
100%. Yeah. Okay. So some of the items we want to discuss today is how AI is transforming PR by turning consumers into co-creators and enhancing engagement strategies.
Yeah. I think there's some really interesting case studies out there of ways that we are trying to better engage consumers and make them sort of AI advocates for our brands. If you think about Coca-Cola just had a Create Real Magic where they invited fans to remix the classic Coke iconography with ChatGPT and DALL-E. And it was interesting because the way that Coke did that while protecting its brand is they provided a website for a limited time with access to branded elements to digital designers. And then the campaign became part of Coca-Cola's Real Magic global brand platform, which is rooted in this idea that magic lives in unexpected moments of collection that happen every day and create an extraordinary, environment. So the crowd generated art filled outdoor billboards. They had social media fields. They had an entire user generated, area where people could go in and see these beautiful images that were created. And I felt like that was a really good example of how you can still manage your brand, but allow your consumers to come in, get more hands-on with your brand and create incredible things that you can then leverage. So the brand keeps the oversight, but you end up with this user-generated storytelling.
Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool. I think, there's always seems to be, like a theme when it comes to like what I thought of was like, using something like that to create Super Bowl advertisements, right? Where, that could be something that I think companies and brands could look into. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Enjoy 30 days free of Audible Premium Plus by going to ontopofpr.com/audible.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
Any other thoughts on how AI is transforming PR?
Yeah, I think for PR in particular, a lot of PR work has been, drafting media pitches. The way that we're now using it at Egnyte is we can leverage one of the AI agents to auto draft these media pitches for us. And then what we tell it to do is to go look at a journalist's last 3 bylines. So we provide that training to the AI agent, and then we ask them to tailor hooks accordingly. So that's one way that we're doing it. We also are using, translation AIs globally to make sure that they're translating our press releases, having translation tools for video captions, and then deep diving into figuring out more technical topics, having AI help us leverage that from a tech perspective. So how do we take technical topics and make them more accessible to the average person? So we've been using that a lot in our press office.
Nice. One thing that I've been struggling with when it comes to AI is, you've got so much power and content capabilities at your fingertips that I'm often producing more content than I can actually do something with, right? And I worry that not only, do I feel that way, but that my colleagues will feel that way as well. Is that something you guys have faced? And if so, how are you addressing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's just, we kind of have viewed that as an opportunity to be more specific in our content creation. So we now have a really strong content calendar, and we have taken the time to use AI to look back on the content that has been created. I think, a lot of companies over time, I mean, we have so much content that has been created. And I know that, my peers and others have experienced this, where you have to take some time to go back to look at, what was created. It's, basically like a website cleanup, your content cleanup. I mean, every couple of years, people have to do this. But what we're doing is implementing AI to have it automatically do it in the background for us and come back and tell us, which is still relevant, which content do we need to perhaps either update or get rid of. And so that's really been beneficial for us. I mean, I think it's an incredible opportunity to use that for our content creation. It also helps us identify, like, if we have gaps in our content that we just didn't see maybe, or if there are gaps that we purposely had. It's good to have someone, kind of remind you and look at stuff and say, okay, well, you have, content in this area, but maybe, for us, collaboration might need more content. Whereas governance and security, we have a number of pieces of content in that area. So it helps us really know where to point our resources so that we're using them more effectively.
Nice. Well, that's a good segue into why should we be paying attention to AI governance and ethical concerns as the technology rapidly evolves in the communications profession. Where are your thoughts on that, Jessica?
Well, I think it's super important to make sure that you are creating, governance for your AI and being careful with your security. So, for instance, AI, I would treat it like you would any other vendor. So you need to have like an AI style guide, which is parallel to your tone of voice style guide. So include, things that you will not train AIs on. So like a do not train list, maybe disclosure rules and review checkpoints, and a usage log for compliance. So you need something like that to make sure that, people are using AI appropriately for your company.
Okay, great. Got it. And we'll put in our episode notes. We've talked about this before, but we have an AI policy template available to our audience. So we'll add that to the episode notes so that people can check that out.
That'd be great. Yeah, that's another important thing to have for sure.
Yeah, I want to circle back earlier in the conversation. You were outlining a lot of very efficient things that you're using AI for, and I'm not going to pretend to remember all of them, but there were several things there. And I just have to be honest, the light bulb, the contrarian view in my mind kind of popped up and said, obviously some of these tasks that you're now using AI for, is eliminating at least some labor costs from your organization. You mentioned translation, you mentioned editing, and things like that. So, there's definitely some sort of pivot that, the market is going to have to absorb as, maybe there's, I'll call it less sophisticated work being delegated to AI, but, at some point someone was making these captions or doing some sort of activities, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
And, there's certainly in the employment market, we're seeing some layoffs happen. And at least for me, part of it's the bias of my network and my community, but I'm seeing a lot of writers who are, coming out saying, hey, I'm looking for something new. And I think part of that is probably a little bit AI driven, because there's content is easy to get out of a generative AI tool. Again, rough first draft needs a lot of hand holding and tweaking, and you got to give it the input like we talked about, like a style guide and otherwise. But I do sense that companies are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is. It is something that we as professionals in this particular profession need to be very aware of, is the fact that, it does make teams more efficient. And so there are potentially lesser type roles, but I always kind of view that, as an opportunity for something different than, for instance, if you look at if we kind of equate this a little bit to like the rise of the fractional CMO or the rise of the fractional CCO, I think that more companies are going to be able to take advantage of the expertise of people in our profession, while also, while also big companies continuing to use, people and AI at the same time. So I think there is this opportunity for us professionally to sort of look at our occupation in a different way. So for instance, you mentioned like a lot of writers are out there. I mean, it's hard to create your own firm. I've done it before myself. It's really difficult and hard to get, people to hire you. But I also think, when you look out there, there's lots of websites now that have popped up that are allowing people to, hire people just to do one-off sort of thing. I think that might be a little bit where our profession is moving. I think big companies are going to keep big teams. I think smaller companies might have smaller teams and be a little bit more efficient. But I think that there will be a surprise at some point to all of us that something else will rise out of this that we'll need.
Oh, yeah. I like that. And I think I tend to agree with you on that. So what is the next generation of public relations and communication professionals? What must they do to master and integrate AI into their workflows effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. First of all, you and I talked about prompt craft. I think the next generation has to know how to get the model to give them usable drafts. I think we're just at the beginning of that. I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier about what I'm seeing at my company. I think we're just at the beginning of like figuring out the prompts and how to create usable drafts, but that's something that we'll need in the next generation. Data literacy is never going to go away. I think reading dashboards for insights, not just numbers, is something that the next generation of marketing and communication professionals are going to need. And then, we did kind of talk about this earlier, but I do think ethical judgment is something that is going to have to a skill that is going to have to really be refined by people. So you can spot hallucinations or bias. I think senior executives in our profession can run red team drills. I think they can give interns a brief, let AI generate it, then collectively critique the tone, the facts,
right,
the brand to make sure it still fits.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see more things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And with what you're saying exactly. Based on that, I'm wondering, and I'm not going to make a decision right now, but I might put some of my favorite AI prompts into this episode notes, or I might wait and record a solo cast about that, or even put it into our weekly, our PR Hack of the Week email. I'll have to think through where the best way to share that is. But you're reminding me, I think that a lot of our audience would benefit from seeing some of the prompts that, my team and I have developed that we, kind of have templates for as our go-to. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's something my team is working through as well. So some of my team has moved further along than others. And I think that's something that we all need to take up the mantle and just make sure that we're doing. So that would be very helpful, I bet.
Yeah, I think some takeaways from this conversation and others is, one, have a AI policy that you're doing a great job of communicating. I say both internally and externally, so that your agencies, your vendors, whomever you're using, are also understanding what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to your company. Number one. Number two, like we said, you need to have more of an authorized tech stack that your team is using and you've enabled. Third, I would say is, you need to have some formal, and you talked about this, some formal training or what methodology you use to give the right input. And then four, I would say, some kind of standardization of the prompting that you would use. And then lastly, the steps that you go through once you've had a generative AI draft that you go through internally to make sure something just doesn't hit. And, for example, I did a training with my team, and I recorded it so that people who couldn't attend live could see it later. And I took one of our clients, I had AI draft a bio, I showed them how it worked and blah, blah, blah. I saved it to our shared directory, but I didn't mark this is a rough draft, this is AI generated or anything like that. But the training, if somebody watched the training, it linked to it. And so one of the people who didn't attend the training went to look for somebody's bio, they found the bio and they sent it. And it was not correct. And I didn't realize that they had kind of saved it or bookmarked it and was using it on the regular. It was correct enough that it worked, but at the end of the day, I learned a valuable lesson of we need to label the file, to what draft it is, or express that this was a test. This was done for demonstration purposes only.
Yeah.
And, the person's argument was, well, I hadn't seen the training yet. And my argument was, well, you should have watched the training, since we made that investment. So, Jessica, as we're wrapping up here, how might our audience best get a hold of you if they want to connect with you and continue the conversation?
Absolutely. Well, you can reach me on my work email at jpantages@egnyte.com, or also on LinkedIn, Jessica Pantages. That's probably the best ways.
Wonderful. Any parting words of wisdom when it comes to leveraging the power of PR in your role that you would want to share with your colleagues?
Yeah, I think in the future, we're going to end up seeing, I don't think AR is ever going to be able to write brand stories, or AI, my apologies, is ever going to write brand stories by itself. I think we're going to see story layered APIs. I think we should think of AI agents as auto-assembly copy, maybe imagery and tone modules based on real-time audience feedback. And then we would then push out variations to social media or the newsroom in seconds. So I think humans will set the narrative arc and the ethics, and machines will handle the infinite micro stories.
Right.
So we should kind of view ourselves maybe in the future as more story systems architects instead of just communicators. And I think that's exciting for everybody.
I much prefer the term architect than operator, so I'm on board with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, thanks again for being here. We really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you did too. Let's stay in touch and continue to keep our audiences updated with your progress and your insights.
That sounds terrific. Thanks so much, Jason. This was a great time.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. Thank you. So with that, it's been another episode of On Top of PR. If you enjoyed the conversation with Jessica today, I'd hope you'd take a minute to share this episode with your friends and colleagues, whether that's on social media or through email or DM or text message, whichever way you can reach someone that you know of or you could think of that would benefit from today's conversation. We want to thank Jessica for sharing her smarts with us. And if you have any questions or comments about this episode, please feel free to leave a comment or contact Jessica directly. With that, this is Jason Mudd from Axia Public Relations signing off, helping you stay on top of PR.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.